fame. If you win it, comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to?
Welcome to Boomer Pod Podcast, everyone. Today's guest is movie and television director and stunt coordinator, Lauro de Valle. Hello, Lauro, and thank you for sharing with us.
Hi, Larry. How you doing? Good to be here.
Now, Ken Kersinger connected us. Have you worked with Ken?
Yes, many, many times. We're in the same group in Canada. It's called Stunts Canada. It was formed in 1970, so it's been around for about 50 years. And Ken was in the group long before I was. And then when I was voted in, we began working together. And I've done a lot of stunts for Ken. When he's been the stunt coordinator, he's hired me. And he's actually done some stunts for me when I'm the stunt coordinator. And we often work together as stunt performers. Not so much anymore these days, but that's how we came up together in our careers as stunt performers and on to become stunt coordinators and second unit directors. And then I moved on to direct and so on and so forth.
Well, he was one of my more interesting interviews. I really like Ken. He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. He's been some pretty major
credits
characters.
You as director, writer, producer, and stunt coordinator. How did you start and then progress in the industry?
Well, I started at the very bottom as a background extra. And I worked my way up to become a stunt performer. That was always my goal, was to become a stunt performer. So I became an extra merely so I could get onto sets and meet stunt coordinators, give them my resume, and tell them about my skill sets in martial arts and horses and rodeo and motorcycles and stuff like that, so that I could impress on them that I needed to be hired as a stuntman. And eventually, after about a year of doing extra work, I got some lucky breaks and started getting stunt work, and my career kind of took off from there.
Okay, one of your first directing roles was the movie Born to Raise Hell. What can you tell us about working with Steven Seagal?
That's a very interesting question. Mr. Seagal is a very interesting person. And I actually got the job because I was hired as a second unit director on a movie for the first time, working with him and with that company. And my footage melded seamlessly with the main unit director. So they were impressed, and the next movie that they were going to do, we were going to shoot the movie in Detroit. So we had a conference call, we were planning it all out. And then after the call, the director called me, says, "Hey, look, I can't do this movie in Romania. I have some family issues. I have to stick around home." And I said, "Oh, I guess we're not doing this movie then." He goes, "Yeah, you are." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I think you're ready to direct. And I'm going to pitch you to the producers. I'm going to pitch you to Steven. And I think you can do this one." So he did that, and the producers okayed it, but then I had to fly to LA and sit with Steven and tell him what my plan was to shoot the movie and stuff like that, and sell him on the idea that I could direct it. And he accepted me as the director, and off to Romania we went to make that movie, Born to Raise Hell. So he's about a foot taller than me, so I often stood on an apple box so I could stand up and look him in the eye and give him direction. But yeah, interesting character. He's quite in the moment. Like sometimes he'd come to set and he had in the script, it would say he says all this long dialogue, and he'll just come in and he'll say 5 to 10 words and that's it, and then the other actor has to take over. Or he could go the other way. He might have supposed to only say 5 or 6 words, and he'll go on a long tangent. So the actors really got to pay attention when they're working with him, the other actors, because they have to, it's very real. They have to pick up off of what he's actually saying. They can't just only memorize the script. They have to listen and pay attention to the actual conversation and become a part of it. So that was really an interesting situation in directing him and directing other actors that were working with him.
Now, there are other action stars that you've worked with. To name a few: Tom Cruise, Jackie Chan, and Sylvester Stallone. How did you interact with each of them? Let's start with Tom.
Tom was well. He's an amazing athlete. He's an amazing actor. He could have been a top stuntman if he wanted to be a stuntman. I mean, he is in theory. He does 99.9% of all his own stunts. So my interaction with Tom was first started on The Last Samurai, where I was tasked with being the fight coordinator. So I had to train with Tom and train Tom a lot for the film. Train him on horse work, train him in sword work, spears, martial arts, grappling. So he was great to work with. He's like a workaholic. He works 20 hours a day, and he actually flew me to Telluride, Colorado, to train with him at his home for weeks, and then he would train every day during the course of that year that we shot that movie and prepped for it. And he would shoot a 14-hour day on set and then come and train after and go home at late at the end of the day. So just a amazing guy, hard worker, and really catches on quick, and a good athlete, pays attention. So a very generous man too. He was really good to us, and made sure we were taken care of all throughout the shoot. And then I went on to work with him on Collateral and Mission Impossible 4. And the guy's got a memory like you wouldn't believe. On Mission Impossible 4, he saw me in the crowd. It was a big street scene, and he came running up to me. "Hey, Lash, how you doing? How's Colby? How's Kelsey?" That's my two oldest kids. And it had been 10 years since I'd worked with him. And how he remembered my two oldest kids, I have no idea, because I'm sure he'd met a million people in between there. So it was quite impressive that he remembered them. And yeah, super great guy to work with.
And how about Jackie Chan?
Jackie's a phenomenon. He started as a stuntman, and became a action star after Bruce Lee passed away, and he kind of carried the torch from there. And I was a big Jackie Chan fan before I ever worked with him on Rumble in the Bronx, and I was just dying to work on that show for him. I would have done it for nothing. And they came over to Canada, and they did it in a very Hong Kong way, and they had no script, and they just kind of made it up as they went along. And it's the first time I went into audition for them. I was pretty young. I was about 23 at the time, and was clean shaven, and I looked really young. And they said, "Oh no, you're too young to be part of the gang," because they were looking to put a gang together that had to fight with Jackie throughout the movie. And so later on, I went to work on another movie, and I grew a goatee and everything. And my friend Mark Akerstream, who passed away, he was the stunt coordinator on the show, and he came by set to visit us. And I said, "Mark, take a picture of me." So he took a Polaroid, and I said, "Take that back and see if you can get me in for casting again, to see if I can get a role on that movie," because they weren't ready to go yet. So he did, and they called me back in. Didn't recognize that I was the same guy now that I had a beard. And I went in, and this time I had to actually audition with Jackie. I had to do some dialogue with him, and then I had to do a fight with him right then and there in the audition room. So I was nervous as hell, but I guess I did okay, because I barely stepped out the door, and they said, "You got a part." And I said, "Great. When am I working?" "Oh, we don't know yet, but you have 10 days. "Okay, great." And I said, "Can I read the script or anything?" "No script, but here's a story outline." It was about 5 pages, basically told you the gist of the story. And they did some wardrobe fitting, and then that was it. And I started working with Jackie, and we came onto the set the very first day. We were doing a fight scene in a grocery store, and Jackie's guys had already worked it out with him, and they already knew what they were doing. And they just, you start here, and they put another guy over there. "You start here, you start here." "Okay, and action." Like, wait a minute, time out before Jackie hits me. What are we doing? Like, we kind of got to learn these moves and stuff like that. So his stunt guys would show us like 3 moves, and then we'd do a couple moves with Jackie, and they'd cut. He just does it in pieces, and puts it all together. And yeah, it was just crazy. And they had a dialogue coach there from Hong Kong, and all he would ever say to us is, "What would you say in this situation?" And I was supposed to be the Mexican in the gang, so I'd say, "Yo, que pasa, man? What you doing?" And he'd go, "Yeah, you say that." So we just made up the dialogue as we went along. There was no script to go by. And like I said, I was contracted for 10 days, and 56 days later, I was finally off the movie. It just kept going and going and going, and they just kept making it up as they went along. But Jackie, he was hands-on, helping choreograph everything. He made the final decisions on the fight scenes and how the scenes were constructed. Stanley Tong was the director. And then in between takes, Jackie play hacky sack with us, and he would help sweep up or pull cable or whatever needed to be done. He wasn't acting like a movie star at all. He was just one of the guys. It's pretty cool. And of course, an amazing martial artist. You just could barely see the guy move. He was so fast back in those days.
He's a very interesting guy. But then there's our tough guy, still Sylvester Stallone. What can you tell me about Sly?
Well, the days that I worked with him, he was kind of at the peak of his success and everything like that. He was very unapproachable, but very focused. Obviously, he's a very focused individual on his work and what he does and stuff like that. And so I was asked to double him a couple of times, but every time that happened, I was never available. And always a good friend of mine, Mark D'Alessandro, doubled him for about 25 movies. And so he tried to put me in there a couple of times, but that never panned out. So I only worked as a stunt man in different scenes with him and stuff like that. But one of the funniest things is the stunt coordinator came up to us all one morning and he said, "Hey, so when you're working with Sly, whatever you do, don't whistle." And we said, "Yeah, nobody. What do you mean whistle? We don't whistle. We whistle when we work. That's not something that we do, So this one buddy of mine, Mitch, he gets the task of being the stunt driver, and Stallone's in the car with him, and they're driving, and for some odd reason, Mitch starts to whistle, and Sly got so mad. "Hey, don't whistle!" And he's like, "Oh shit, yeah, I was told not to whistle. I forgot about that. My father used to beat me when he whistled. Don't whistle." So he had some sort of trauma going on with this whistling business that he didn't appreciate. So Mitch was just like biting his tongue the rest of the scene and stuff like that. But it's like, sure enough, you tell somebody not to do something just offhand, they're going to do it accidentally. It was kind of hilarious and bizarre. But yeah, he was fine and very professional, and that's the most that I know of him because I never really got to do anything major with him.
An interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's been said that you have a keen visual sense of storytelling. Can you give us an example of how that's manifested in one of your films or TV series?
Well, I'm a sponge, so I always wanted to be a stuntman, but once I got on set, I was trying to learn everything to do with everybody's job, in the sense of to see how it works and how it enhances what we're putting on the screen as far as shooting visually. So, I got to work with John Woo. I got to work with Steven Spielberg. I've the host of great directors. So just watching and learning and taking pieces of what they do. And it's like a puzzle when you're trying to put together a scene or a sequence, and you're trying, especially when you're shooting an action sequence, you're trying to enhance the action and have the audience feel it. You know what I mean? You can just videotape something and have somebody run or fight or knock somebody down or whatever, and it is what it is. But if you want to feel it as an audience member and feel the pain, you've got to cut your angles and change that, and also change your speeds, go from fast to slow motion, or even ramp it even faster. So there's all these different techniques that we use within camera, within editing, that enhances so that the audience feels like they're right there in the action. And that's what I'm always trying to accomplish. And even with the scenes, I mean, Tony Scott was one of my biggest. I was a big fan of Tony Scott, and the way that he played with the editing and the speeds and the angles. I could often feel when I was watching his movies, the emotion of the actor was enhanced. What that person was feeling, whether they were sad or mad or excited, you could feel that in the way that he cut it and the way that he shot it. And I just felt that was something that I wanted to pick up on. And so I just try to focus on that every time I'm shooting. And like I said, it has a lot to do with the editing and the way you manipulate the camera and the speeds, going from regular speed to super slow motion, or going the opposite way and speeding it up even. So those are all visual enhancements that I constantly have in the back of my mind when I'm shooting to implement into the shot.
In your stunt coordinator reel, you highlight some amazing film feats. Can you cover the greatest challenges that you faced in each of them? Let's start with fire stunts.
Fire stunts are somewhat the opposite of what people think. So first off, you've got to almost get hypothermic. So we dip our Nomex and our fireproof underwear into ice cold gel. So we put it in the freezer, so it doesn't freeze, but gets really close to freezing. And you soak the Nomex in there and the material in there so that it's saturated with this gel. And this is fire retardant gel. It keeps us from getting burnt. We put on 2, 3, sometimes as much as 4 layers of that. And when you start putting it on, and oftentimes we're outside and it's cold and it's wet already, and we're putting that on, and you're just freezing. You're so cold, right? And you can barely breathe. It's just taking your breath away. And then you put the costume on over top of that, and then they put the accelerant, the fuel, on top of your costume before you get lit on fire. And then whatever catches you on fire, whether you go through a fire or somebody shoots you with a flare or whatever happens to light you up, all of a sudden it catches on all the fuel that's on your costume that we've pre-dressed and put on. And it depends on the size of the burn, how long you have to burn, but the basic test is, or the basic warning signal is you're so cold and you can burn for quite a while, and as soon as you start to feel any heat anywhere, you know that it's going to start to really amp up and get hot and burn you. So that's our cue to lay down. And as soon as we lay down or give the signal, that's when our guys come in and rush in and put us out. And they start with the fire extinguisher and put it from the head down to the feet. Sometimes we put each other out with wet blankets, but fire extinguishers are preferred. They're a lot quicker and a lot more reliable. But yeah, so it goes from cold to hot really quick. And the gel that we put on our face, or it can melt off. So there's certain parts, it depends what way you're moving. I know I did a fire burn for Smallville once, and all my movement was backwards. And usually we're always going forwards, which causes the heat to go behind us. So it keeps us cooler longer and we can burn longer. But this was a situation where I had to walk backwards as per the director's direction. And all the heat came up in my face and came up underneath my chin. So although I put just a huge bunch of gel in here to protect it, it melted it away shortly, and I got burnt really badly under here. And it's just depends on your movement. You gotta hold your breath or have a breath hold device. You gotta keep your eyes closed because you'll burn your retinas. It's just and you can't breathe in, because if you breathe in, the fire will go right into your lungs and cook your lungs. So you've got all these things to think about while you're trying to act and pretend like you're on fire and go through the whole scene. And you might have to walk a certain place in the house too. You might have to go from this room to that room, and you have to already have rehearsed it and predetermined what you're going to touch and how you're going to get there. And then you got to be careful when you touch stuff, because the gel will come off your hands and then the fire will burn your hands. So there's just so much to think about when you're doing a fire burn, and you've got to really prep it and rehearse it to make sure that it goes right.
Now, how about horse stunts?
Well, horse stunts, I mean, I grew up on horses, and I did rodeo when I was a kid, and continue to own horses to this day. But horses are their own thing. They're a living being, and they have their own mind. So as much as you train them, there's so many things that we do on a film set that are not natural for a horse. So of course you want to bring them on set, you want to acclimate them to the lights and the people and the cameras, and then especially we're always doing war scenes. So there's guns, there's cannons, there's explosions. So it takes a long time to get the horses used to this type of stuff. And a lot of times we'll put cotton in their ears so it's not so loud for them and stuff like that. But yeah, you can train a horse and you'll rehearse with it, and it'll do the same thing every day on rehearsal. And then the day you go to do it on set, it sidesteps or jumps or does something different. So 99% of the time goes off without a hitch, because we rehearse it so much, and we make it just second nature for the horse and second nature for yourself. And once you're in tune with a horse like that, it's just teamwork. But again, they've got a mind of their own, and if something spooks them, and they're a fight or flight animal, right? So they run most of the time like a deer. So they're always ready to bolt and get away from something. And so if something spooks them or is different from what the rehearsal was, there's a good chance they're going to take off in a different direction. So you just got to be super conscious and be at one with your horse, so you know what's going on, and had time with it so that it's going to perform the way you want it to. And of course, you can get stepped on, you can get trampled, and those are all bad side effects of doing horse work, but it happens, and you plan for it, but things go wrong every now and again.
And the very popular car stunts
Car stunts. Wow. They're some of the most dangerous because you're flying around in a 5,000-pound vehicle. So crushes things very easily, especially if anybody gets in the way or if the car goes the wrong way. And it's so hard to determine when we're doing stunts. You really got to break it down, and the speed that you're going to go, right down to inflating the tires properly. So if you want to skid, if you want to slide, how much you're going to slide, and when you got to stop it, that you'll be able to stop at that point. So mechanically, they've got to be gone over and make sure that everything works properly, because the brakes got to be on point. The emergency brake is our most common tool. That's how we slide the ass end of the car around and slide around corners and drift and do those kind of tricks. So it's all got to be tuned up and looked after properly. Otherwise, there's just no guarantee that it's going to happen the way you want it to happen. And then the bigger gags, when you're rolling a car, cannon roll or pipe roll. So pipe roll is where you go off a skinny little ramp. It's about, it's just in one pipe, and it flips your car as you take off of it. It makes the car tip one way or the other, depending what side you hit it on. And a cannon is actually something that special effects welds into your car. And we blow out, either with air or with an explosion, we blow out a chunk of steel or a chunk of pole, and it pushes the car, so it flips it. And as much as the stunt driver turns the car, sets the angle for the way that it's going to roll. And so trying to determine, they often ask us, where's this car going to land? It's like, wow, that is the toughest question of all. It just depends on the speed that you come in, the angle that you hit it at, and when you hit the cannon or when you hit the pipe ramp, where it's going to tumble to and how many tumbles it's going to do. And again, the wheel may catch funny. A fender may catch on dirt as opposed to pavement or cement. So that all affects how it's going to roll and turn. So it's, a lot of us and a lot of guys are specialized in it, and they've done it for years, but it's so hard to put into a fine science. And when they're on the bigger budget shows, the $250 million, the $300 million movies, they've got rehearsal cars that they can wreck, and they can do it time and time again and make sure that they dial in it exactly. But then you go back to a low budget movie that's $1 million or $2 million. You don't get the rehearsal, you don't get the other car. You just got to come in and do it, and make sure that everybody's cleared out of the way. There's no cameras in the way, no crew in the way, no bogeys, no people coming onto set, and set it up so that you're not going to kill yourself or anybody else. So a lot of work goes into it. It's a lot of work to make that 2-second crash look so amazing for a film, and a lot of risk. So I can see why they're the favorite.
Now you're going to have to help me with this next one. Explain wire work, ratchets, and air rams. What does that mean?
Well, often you'll see, especially in superhero movies, you'll see people get grabbed by a superhero and they fly and throw them across the room, right? And they'll smash into a wall, go through a window, whatever. Well, we have a harness that we put on, and it's a full body harness, and it goes underneath our costume. And then we poke holes in the costume so that we can attach a wire with a shackle into the harness. The harness has all kinds of little loops all over it, right? And we put shackles in there, and then we can hook a wire onto it, and you can yank us this way, you can yank us that way, whatever direction we want to go. And you'll see that in Peter Pan when he's flying, any superheroes that are flying, quite often it's wire work. And then sometimes we'll have 4 wires on us, sometimes we'll have 2 or 1, depends how we want to manipulate the person in the air. So a ratchet is a air compressed cylinder that actually, when it's fired, it pulls the cylinder in, and there's a rod that's attached to it, and that rod has a wire on it, and that wire runs to a pulley and another pulley and then to the stunt performer. So it would be attached to my back or my hip or something like that, which would indicate the way that the person is going to hit me or throw me to send me flying through the air. So right at the point where the person goes to throw me, they'll hit the button on the ratchet will pull me, and I'll go flying. And when it's put together correctly, choreographed correctly, it looks like that person threw me out the window or through a wall or whatever the scene might require. So that's typical wire work. And anytime you're flying, you often have 4 points, on 2 on your shoulder, 2 on your hips, and you're being flown around the room. And they'll have different rigs that they'll put in the ceiling, which you can be flown around on. So there's just hundreds and hundreds of different examples of wire work and how your body can be flown around or pulled or you're jerked or yanked or whatever, right? So that's typically what we talk about when we say our wire work. And sometimes it's just by hand. Sometimes we won't have a ratchet. We'll just use a couple of stunt guys to do a hand pull. So they'll run a cable up through a shiv, attach it to the stunt performer, and they'll be holding onto the rope, and then they'll jump off a ladder and yank the person, and they'll go flying out of the scene the same way they would with a ratchet, but not quite as powerful. Usually, sometimes hand pulls are, get some big guys on there, and they're pretty powerful. Now, an air ram is something completely different, has nothing to do with wires. Again, we use compressed air. We use oxygen tanks, and it's a small springboard. It looks like a springboard, or a mini catapult is what I usually call it. So it's got rams underneath of it here. So when the oxygen is released, the ram is pushed up like this. So the arm pushes it. So when you step on this, as you step on it, it triggers and it pushes the nitrogen or the air in there, whichever you're using, and this flicks up like that. So if you're standing on that, you go flying. So you can, there's some crazy huge air rams that I've seen launch people 40 feet, 40, 50 feet. And the same thing with some of the air ram gigs that I've done. It sends you flying big time. They're used less and less. They're a lot more dangerous in some senses because if you don't step on this properly, it'll tear your knee right out of the socket or rip your hamstrings, or, you know, they're really tough on your legs if you don't do it properly. And sometimes there's so many other things going on in the scene. There's bombs going off, and if you get the slight bit distracted and you step on it incorrectly, or you can't see it because there's dirt flying everywhere, then you're going to get hurt, and it's going to really injure you. And even worse if you end up falling on it. Now, the bad part with wire work is it's a lot more reliable in that sense, but your landing, anything clips you in the air, you hit something that you shouldn't, and your landing is different. And if you're not going into a pad, the chances of landing on your head or your neck or stoving a shoulder into the pavement, it becomes pretty severe. And there's been so many injuries, concussion wise, and spinal injuries with ratchets slamming people and stuff like that. So it's a dicey job all the way around, and you're looking, there's no if you're going to get injured being a stuntman. It's just when, you know, it's just the law of averages. You're going to get hurt. It's part of the job.
Very interesting again. Now, I'm probably going to hear about this from my daughters and my grandkids, but I come from Chicago, and I have been in the bar business, and I was also a military policeman in a very tough area in Germany during the Vietnam War. So
Wow.
I've had my share of fights. And when I see fight scenes in the movies, they don't look like what I've experienced. What can you tell me about choreographing that?
Well, you know, it's always a struggle to choreograph a realistic fight scene because entertainment-wise, people want to see what's going on and see what's happened. Now, I'm sure you've watched some boxing matches where you see two guys boxing in a ring for real, and all of a sudden a guy throws a punch, or you don't even see him throw a punch, and all of a sudden the guy goes down, and you go, what happened? You know, he barely got hit. That hit didn't look very strong, or I didn't even see him get hit. Is he throwing the fight? And so one of the things in real fighting is, you know, if you're boxing, you're trying not to telegraph. So you don't open up and throw a punch like this. You throw it from here. You throw a hook right from here, or you throw a jab straight out. It just comes right away. So in movies and in television, we have to telegraph those movements so that people can see them on the screen. So that's kind of always a tricky part when we hire real fighters and we're trying to teach them how to be stuntman, is they don't want to telegraph their fight. They don't want to telegraph their strikes. So they just do it tight and close. And it's like, no, you got to John Wayne it. You got to open up and throw that hook all the way across so that it sells for camera. So the camera's got to see it, so the audience can see it. So we have to choreograph things completely differently than a real fight situation. And real fights are usually quite sloppy and quite messy, and you often, you know, don't see the best hits. You know, they get in a squabble, they get in a clinch, and, you know, and stuff like that. So it just depends the style that the director wants, that the movie dictates. And usually what people like to see are these long, drawn out, cool looking choreographed fight scenes with spinning kicks and flying this and flying that. And so it's all entertainment, right? It's just like WWF wrestling. I mean, it's all entertainment. It's real moves, but it's all pre-choreographed. And there's some movies where they come in and they want it dirty and ugly, and so you choreograph, so there's a lot of misses and slips and falls and struggles and wrestling and back to some punching, and it just depends what they want for their show and what dictates what in the story. So you gotta make it work for the story. That's always the biggest point.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of flying, I've also fantasized that I could fly. So let's go into the last area, which is high work. Did it have anything to do with flying?
Well, you're definitely flying, and you're flying down to Earth. That's for sure. So, these days high work has changed a lot, and it's gone to mostly wire work. When Ken and I first started, it was all free falls, and we'd be thrown out a window and fall, 40, 50, 100 feet to an airbag or to a box rig, right? Now, box rig is made out of cardboard boxes. And what we have a specific way that we put the boxes together, and then we rope them together or saran wrap them together so that they don't blow apart. And then we do layers upon layers. And depending how high you're jumping from, you have to put more layers on, obviously, and make the rig bigger so that you don't miss it. It can't be too small, because the higher you get, the smaller it looks when you're up there. And then, shortly after, airbags started to come into play, and usually they were used by fire departments for people that were trapped in burning buildings and needed to jump. So they would, at one point, you may have seen way back in the day, firemen had almost what looked like a trampoline to catch people when they jumped. And then they went to an airbag, and that's when the airbag got introduced into the stunt business. And we bought airbags from different fire safety things that supplied them for firefighters. Anyway, they started making what's called an air pack 50, which would be good for 50 feet, an air pack 100, which would be good up to 100 feet, air pack 200, obviously up to 200 feet. And I can't remember what the high fall record is these days, but it's over 200 feet. I know some specialists that have done some bigger fall. That's 20 plus stories. You're talking about jumping from the 25th floor of a building. But nowadays, it's so much safer and easier. And with CGI, you can erase cables so easily that now we typically drop somebody off of a building, and you're in a harness and you're attached to a cable. So one of the craziest ones I ever had to do was I jumped off of a 70-foot parking garage, and I was doubling Ian McShane, and I had to fall straight to my face to the pavement from 70 feet. So what the rig was they let me fall free fall without holding me up at all to the last 10 feet before I hit the pavement. And I was on a descender, and they hit the brake, which is like a motorcycle brake, just in that last 10 feet. So it slows you down so in such a short amount of time, you can't read it on the camera that you're being slowed down. And then I asked them to let go of me about the last 2 feet so that I would have some impact and smack the ground, so it looked like I hit with some impact. So it's just a really fine art of having the best riggers and putting your life in their hands, because they're controlling you on that wire, right? So it's no matter how you do hire work, it's dicey, and it's scary, and you got to trust the other people that you're working with, because they have a big hand in making sure that you land properly. And the same thing when you're going into an airbag, you gotta trust the team that puts the airbag up and tests it for you and stuff like that. You got to take a look at it, make sure it's what you're looking for. Same thing when someone puts a box rig, you don't put it together yourself. You have a team that helps you. And if somebody puts one thing out of place, that can mean all the difference in the world. So it's really a team effort. It's really, you got to have a great team working with you, and trust everybody, and know that they know what they're doing in order to survive those things. Because, obviously if you come off a 100-foot building and something goes wrong, it's the end, so those are always fun ones, gets your heart beating fast.
Well, that certainly curtails my flying fantasies. I'll tell you that. In our prep session, you said that you're working on a new film and TV series. What can you tell us about that, if it's allowable?
Well, I'm not going to tell you the name of this TV series, but I think it's going to do really well. It's basically, bounty hunter is not the right term for it, because he doesn't hunt people like a bounty hunter, but he's a reward hunter, I guess is what you would call it. So typically, if somebody put out a reward for a missing person, $50,000 to find my daughter. She went hiking in Yellowstone Park, and I need someone to find her. She's been missing for a week, and the park rangers can't find her. Did she get eaten by a bear? So this guy specializes in tracking people down and finding them and stuff like that. So you can imagine that some people in the story might get kidnapped. Some people might just get lost. Like you said, there's just 101 different scenarios that you can put into that storyline, and anything could happen. So there's really good action in it. There's really good stories. The main character has some very interesting family issues. So that ties into it all. So it's going to be a really interesting series. And I wish I could kind of give you more about it, but just watch for it. It'll be made apparent when it comes out. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then there's a film that I wrote, and I'm directing and producing with my partners, and it's called Protectors of the Land. And it's a really timely story, and I think it needs to be. It's very fantasy in the sense that basically what happens is the Mexican drug cartel are taking their drugs into Alaska, which is real. That's something I studied and did a bunch of research on. And an indigenous community is being decimated by all the drugs that are being brought through their community and being put upon their people. So they decide to fight back. And so one of the main characters, he connects with his spirit animal, and he's able to become a shapeshifter. And he basically leads the cartel out into the wilderness, and that's where he summons the spirits of his elders, and they're able to come back as shapeshifters, and they're able to enact their revenge on the cartel. So that's what we're working on right now is that particular film. And so we're getting really close to shooting. We've got the cast, we've got all the locations, we've got all the costumes. We've even shot a little bit of the footage already because there's a big skydiving sequence in it. The cartel drops their drugs into a lake, and then they skydive in and try and mule it through the wilderness. So we've shot that part already. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it. It's going to be exciting.
Now for a bit of trivia. Isn't your birthday September 24th?
Yes, it was not too long ago.
That's my mother's birthday.
Oh, wow.
God rest her soul.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but when I read did your research, it just stuck right out to me. Tell me about your family, Lauro.
Well, my mother was an amazing, amazing woman, and she's a big part of my success. She always pushed me to do what my dreams were and never held me back. I left home when I was 12, and she never stopped me. I ran away to be a cowboy and worked in Lake Louise and Banff in the mountains, and as a trail guide, and she let me go do my thing, and she supported me everywhere, every step along the way. So she was a very, very strong woman and very supportive, and she passed away about 3 years ago. And so I have 3 great kids. My son Colby, he's 38 now, and he's a stuntman. He's been working as a stuntman since he was about 8 years old. He started when he was a kid, doubling children, and he's been in the business ever since. So he's also part of Stunts Canada, and he's been doing it for a long time, and he's known as one of the top stunt guys here for sure, which makes me super proud. He's done great. And my oldest daughter, Kelsey, she's 32 now, and she started doing stunts when she was a teenager, and then she walked away from the business, didn't really like it. There's a lot of politics and things like that turned her away. And she went and did several different things: massage therapist, yoga instructor, and different healing arts. And she eventually came back to stunts about 3 years ago now. So she's doing stunts. She's a really good stunt woman, and she's starting to stunt coordinate a bit. So she's really stepping out there. And my youngest daughter, Sienna, she lives in California, and she started out as an actress like her mother, and she's become more of a influencer, social media influencer now, and she's a herbologist and doing all that kind of stuff. So they're all doing great, and I got a couple grandkids. Got a granddaughter who's just turning 11, and my grandson just turned 5. My granddaughter is already in the union doing stunts, so she started when she was 8 as well. She started working with her mom on a show, so it's turned into a 3rd generation family business, which is great.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
What have I missed, Lauro? Is there anything else that you'd like to add or pitch?
No, I think we've covered quite a gamut of what goes on and what we do and that sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to catching up with Ken. He just sent me a text and said, "Hey, I'm back in town. Are we going to do lunch or what?" So I have to get back to him and catch up with him. It's been a while.
Well, you've been a great interview, and you've given us a lot of information, terrific information. Thank you for joining us today on the Boomer Pod, Lauro. Would you consider coming back and let us know how the new projects are going?
I'd love that anytime. Yeah, once we get it in the can, I'd love to share it with you and give you more information about it, and also about this series that we're just starting to do. So, and I got lots more stories too. So,
well, thanks again, and thanks to our valued audience for watching again. Please stay tuned for more interesting celebrity interviews. And thank you, Lauro. Have a great day.
Appreciate it, Larry. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And you will be happy too.